Exactly 42 seconds after the iron crowbar splintered the false bottom of my father's old archive chest, a single sheet of heavy parchment paper slipped out onto my lap. The strange thing wasn't the dust that billowed up into the dim basement light, or the fact that the letter was written in my brother Soren's unmistakable, elegant fountain pen script. The strange thing was the date stamped at the top left corner. It was dated October 14th, 11 years ago, exactly 24 hours before the police siren shattered my life, and before I willingly took the fall to keep my brother out of a prison cell. I didn't realize it then, but the burden I had carried like a badge of brotherly honor wasn't a tragic accident I was helping him survive. It was a meticulously engineered trap, and he had been holding the executioner's lever from day one. It took me 11 long, silent years to understand that the people who build your pedestal are often just looking for a higher place to hang you. Funny thing about memories, they trick you into believing that love and loyalty are the same thing. If you looked at us back then, you would have thought Soren and I were two halves of a single mind. We were building an architectural design firm from the absolute mud of the city's industrial district. I was the structural muscle, spending 18 hours a day calculating load bearings, structural integrity, and turning raw concrete into art. Soren was the face, the brilliant, charismatic visionary who could charm millions out of wealthy developers with a single smile. We had a bond forged in the lean years when we shared a single drafting table and lived on black coffee. I still remember the night we finalized the blueprints for the Meridian Tower, the project that was supposed to put our family name in stone forever. We drove out to an old, half-constructed concrete amphitheater on the edge of the valley overlooking the city lights. The air was crisp, carrying the sharp scent of oncoming rain. Soren threw his arm over my shoulder, pointed down at the glowing metropolis, and made me promise that no matter how massive our empire grew, we would always protect each other. "Blood before bricks, Kaelor," he told me, his pale gray eyes reflecting the distant city lights with an intensity that made me feel safe. I nodded. I meant it with every fiber of my being, but I didn't realize that while I was pouring my soul into the foundations, Soren was quietly rotting the core. 3 months before the tower was set to break ground, our firm was hit with an anonymous state audit. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in municipal development funds had vanished from our corporate accounts. On that fateful October night, I received a panicked, weeping phone call from Soren. He begged me to meet him at the office. When I arrived, the glass storefront was shattered, the central vault was open, and Soren was on his knees, his hands covered in blood from the glass, hyperventilating. He confessed to me that he had made a horrific mistake, that he had borrowed corporate funds to pay off a high-stakes gambling debt to some incredibly dangerous people, and that he had staged a break-in to cover his tracks. He wept against my chest, telling me that if he went to prison, our mother's fragile health would collapse and the firm would die. I didn't hesitate. I thought about the pact we made at the amphitheater. I looked at my brilliant, broken older brother and told him to go home. I grabbed the heavy iron safe handle, wiped his fingerprints away, and stood there in the shattered glass until the police sirens filled the rainy night with red and blue flashes. I took the blame for the embezzlement and the staged burglary. I told the prosecutors I did it alone. Because it was a first offense, and I surrendered the remaining assets, my lawyer managed to get me a reduced sentence. But those years inside a sterile concrete cell changed the very fabric of who I was. Every single month, Soren would sit on the other side of the visitation glass, pressing his hand against the partition, his face filled with an agonizing remorse. He told me he was using every penny the firm made to build a legal fund to clear my name upon release. He told me he was carrying the guilt of my sacrifice like a crown of thorns. I survived that hell because I believed I was saving my brother. When I was finally released, the world had moved on, but I was entirely stuck in the mud. Soren had become a billionaire titan, his name plastered across every major skyscraper in the city. He bought me a small, secluded apartment and quietly paid me an allowance, but he told me that for the sake of the company's public image, I could never step foot inside the headquarters or be seen with him in public. I became a ghost. I spent my days working manual labor at a concrete mixing plant, my hands permanently calloused and gray with dust, watching my brother's triumphant face smile down from towering billboard advertisements across the city. I didn't hate him. I pitied him because I thought he was living with the crushing weight of a secret he could never share. Then, 2 days ago, the illusion was ripped away by a woman named Elira Arden. Elira was a corporate archivist who had been hired to catalog my father's old estate documents after our mother finally passed away. She found me at the concrete plant, her amber eyes filled with a mixture of intense caution and profound sympathy. She didn't say a word. She just handed me a small, rusted iron lockbox that she had discovered hidden behind a loose brick in the deep foundations of the old family archive basement. She told me she had read the legal deeds inside and knew that something about my conviction didn't add up. I took the box to my basement room and forced it open with a crowbar. Inside, beneath a layer of worthless corporate tax returns, lay that original letter. As my eyes scanned the faded ink under the harsh glare of my desk lamp, the room felt like it was spinning out of control. The letter wasn't a confession written in a moment of panic. It was a formal, predatory agreement written by Soren to our firm's wealthy, silent partners, dated a full 24 hours before the staged robbery. In the letter, Soren explicitly detailed a plan to liquidate the missing municipal funds into an offshore account under my name. He wrote, in cold, calculating detail, how he had spent 3 months systematically forging my signature onto every single fraudulent transaction sheet. He told the investors that I had gone rogue, that I was mentally unstable, and that he was going to stage a break-in the following night to catch me in the act and hand me over to the authorities to save the company's reputation. My brother hadn't made a mistake. He hadn't panicked. He had spent months setting me up as the perfect fall guy to cover his own multi-million-dollar theft. The image of him sitting alone at his desk, practicing my signature over and over again, burned into my mind. Every stroke of the pen was a deliberate choice to delete my existence so he could preserve his own. He was building his future by digging my grave. The letter laid it all out. He had planted the digital trail weeks in advance. The modified banking tokens, the encrypted files, everything pointed directly to my locker. The only reason the plan changed slightly was because I had stepped forward and volunteered to take the blame out of love, saving him the trouble of having to execute the trap himself. He didn't even have to frame me. I handed myself over on a silver platter, driven by a beautiful, pathetic lie of brotherly loyalty. He had let me sit in a prison cell for years, watching me rot, while he celebrated his unearned empire on the back of my blind loyalty. He didn't just let me take the fall, he engineered the drop. While I was inside, praying for his success, he was clinking glasses with the very people he traded my life to satisfy. The realization didn't bring rage. It brought an absolute, freezing clarity. I stood in the rain at my mother's grave later that night, the water washing the industrial dust off my face, and for the first time in 11 years, the crushing weight of unearned guilt simply vanished. It was replaced by an armor of pure stone. I wasn't a criminal who had failed his family. I was a protector who had been sacrificed by a monster. The debt I thought I owed him was paid in full, and the ledger was suddenly wide open. I put on my worn canvas work jacket, placed the original letter into my pocket, and walked out into the twilight. I caught a transit bus to the financial district, walking past the security guards at the Voss Architectural Tower. They tried to stop me, looking at my dust-covered boots and rugged face, but I pushed past them with an intensity that made them step back. I was a ghost coming back to claim the house. I took the private elevator straight to the top-floor executive penthouse. When the doors slid open, Soren was standing by the massive panoramic window, looking out over the city skyline with a glass of whiskey in his hand. He turned around, a polite corporate smile forming on his lips until he recognized me. His face instantly drained of color, his pale gray eyes widening in sudden, naked panic. "Kaylor, what are you doing here? We talked about this. You can't be at the office." I didn't let him finish. I walked up to his pristine glass desk and slammed the faded parchment letter down right in the center of his polished blotter. Soren looked down. The moment his eyes hit his own handwriting from 11 years ago, his hand began to tremble so violently that his whiskey glass slipped, shattering against the marble floor. The high-end corporate executive dissolved in a single second, leaving behind nothing but the terrified boy from 11 years ago, caught in his own lie. He collapsed back into his luxurious leather chair, looking up at me not as a billionaire titan, but as the pathetic, terrified coward he had always been. "Kaylor, listen to me," he stammered, his voice cracking as tears of genuine terror welled in his eyes. I was desperate. The investors were going to kill me. I was going to fix it. I swear I was going to make it right. "I spent 11 years believing I was saving your life, Soren," I said, my voice terrifyingly calm, cutting through his panicked excuses like a razor. But the strange thing about foundations is that if you build them on a lie, the weight eventually brings the whole tower down. He had kept the letter as a sick insurance policy, a backup plan in case the investors turned on him anyway, hiding it in our father's archive box where he thought no one would ever look. He built a fortress of secrets, but he forgot that concrete eventual cracks. The very document he designed to protect his skin had become the anchor that was going to drag him to the bottom. I didn't wait for his apologies. I didn't demand money. I turned around and walked out of the office, leaving him alone in his glass fortress, completely paralyzed by the realization that his carefully constructed kingdom was now entirely in my hands. When I reached the street, Elira was waiting for me in the evening mist, holding the official legal files that would finally hand the true evidence over to the federal prosecutors. I looked up at the towering skyscrapers, the neon corporate logos, and the massive billboards bearing his face. None of it belonged to him anymore. It was all built on a debt that was finally due. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a small, torn piece of the blueprint from our youth, the dream we had built in the mud, and let the city wind carry it away into the dark. It was time to build something real. I walked back to the old concrete amphitheater as the dawn began to break. The morning sun cut through the heavy storm clouds, painting the city below in sharp, clean lines of gold and white. There was no brother beside me this time, no fake packs, just the cold, clean truth of a fresh start. Have you ever spent over a decade protecting someone's deepest secret, only to realize the entire tragedy was engineered to make you the villain from day one?